Okay, beautiful. So let's go over just the stuff we need. So the nice thing about just like doing what we want this year is I've just decided we're just not gonna have tests. So we'll just have like little assessments here and there, but we're not gonna have like this cumulative, like huge tests like in the past. Because what's the point? Like if I give you a little assessment on it, we're just gonna move on. So we just kind of keep doing our thing. But that means on next Monday, we're gonna have just a little assessment. I think it's like 12 or 14 problems, so not super long. And these are the basic things on it. So that's why today I wanna make sure we're good. So on Friday, I did leave you some videos. Excuse me. So we're gonna go over that first, how to simplify a radical, and then how to rationalize a denominator. Those were the things like on Math Excel that I think were messing us up, so I wanna make sure we clear those up. And then the other stuff we've done were the 6 trig functions. I'm just giving some different information. Basically, we'll look at a few of these. We'll do one of each of these, and then we'll just try one or two as a wrap up. So nothing too crazy. All right. So this is the big thing. And we use it all year. That's why I was like, hey, let's just kind of stop and make sure we're good with this. Once again, it might have been a while since you've seen it. Let's do the square root of 99. So I'm gonna show you 2 different methods. I don't care which method you do as long as we get the same answer. It really just depends how far your teacher showed you in the past. But let's just make sure we're okay with simplifying in general. So when I say simplifying, you're gonna make a factor tree. You're gonna find 2 factors of 99. So in my head pops 9 times 11. So here's how I do it, and then I'm gonna show you both ways. So I don't really care which way you do it. In my head, I say, I know the perfect squares. I know 4 and 9 and 16. I can take the square root of all those. So I say, oh, I know the square root of 9. The square root of 9 is 3. I would say, oh, the square root of 11, we say that's irrational. And that's how I would write my answer. Some people, so I'm just gonna show you the other way. In the past, have you guys gone down and done doubles? Does that look familiar to anyone? Mm-hmm. And then your double is 3. You got the same answer, so I don't really care. Basically, all that's saying is I know that the square root of 9 is 3. So usually I kind of stop there if you do the double thing. It works too. You get the same answer. So I don't care what process you're doing, as long as you can simplify. So let's try a few more just for practice sake. So let's say I said find the square root or simplify the square root of 24. We're always going to leave things as simplified radicals. We never want decimals, those are gross. So if I do this, I say, okay, I'm going to split it up and I'm going to find 2 factors of 24. So I'm going to do 4 times 6. So when I'm doing it in my brain here, I'm kind of thinking of my perfect squares. 49, that's 7 is 64, is 81, is 100. So I always try to make one of my factors these. If you're doing it the double way, you can kind of just do whatever you please. But I would say, oh, the square root of 4 is 2. The square root of 6, yeah, I can break it down to 2 and 3, but that's not really going to help me. So I'm just going to write that as the square root of 6. So once again, if you're doing a different process, but you're getting that answer, we're good. So there's no one right way to do it. So there's one thing I do want to point out to you. If I did something like the square root of, the square root of 48. And you're saying, okay, 48, I'm going to find my factors. I would just off the bat, I can see that's divisible by 4. 4 times 12. Just make sure you always check your other factor. So like I know the square root of that, so I'm feeling pretty good there. Or you can break it down and that's a double. But this one, I can kind of keep going. So just make sure you always check all your factors. So that would be 4 times 3, and then 3's prime. So once again, that would give me a double of 2's. This would also give me a double of 2's. And then that square root of 3 would stay underneath. If you have 2 numbers out here, you're just always going to multiply them together. So what happens when you guys are using Math Excel, and I think this is why people are getting frustrated, is like if you put square root of 48 in for an answer, it's gonna mark it wrong. Technically, it's right, it's just not simplified. So it expects you to write your answer like that. So just little things with the simplifying will help us out, and we wanna make sure we're writing our answers as correctly as possible. So just kind of based off that, and as a reminder of stuff we've seen in the past, can you try to simplify the square root of 50? If you try that one just on your own, would you know where to start? Would you know what to do? Hey, if you don't know what to do in a second, you're just gonna say, I don't know what to do, and then I will help you. Because that is my job. But this is one of the things we see all the time, so please ask a question if you don't get it. Oh, it's so lucky I'm close today. Alright, so you can kind of start where you please. I'm always trying to start getting a number off that like perfect square list, but if you're doing the double thing, that works as well. So I would say, oh, that's 25 times 2. If you're breaking this down more, you can do 5 times 5 and find your double. I just usually say the square root of that is 5. And then the square root of 2 is you can't really break down anymore, so that would be your simplified answer. Does anyone have a question with that, or would anyone like to do more examples? Okay, so that tells me you're okay, so I'm gonna do the next thing. Just for fun. Okay, so that was something I just wanted to re-brain up. Hey, if your calculator does that, I'm happy for you, like use it up. Like, I don't care, as long as you can simplify it. At this point, you can always use a calculator. Not every, like, I have a graphing calculator, mine doesn't simplify them, but some of the scientific ones do, I don't know why. But if yours does it, happy for you. Just throw it in and that works. So just as a heads up about that. So there's one other thing with radicals that pops up kind of a lot randomly, and it's called rationalizing the denominator. I think I've maybe mentioned it before, I can't remember. So what happens is when we're giving a final answer for any, either whether a trig problem or just any math problem, if we get a fraction, we never want a square root in the bottom of a fraction. It's just like one of those rules that's frowned upon. So we need a way to kind of remedy that. So we're gonna do the same process every time, which is nice. We're basically just gonna change the numbers. So the process is, you're always gonna multiply. You're gonna make a new fraction. Whatever's in the denominator right here, you're going to put that over itself. So technically when we put something over itself, it's really just a 1. It's just a fancy way of writing 1. So technically we're keeping the same value, but we're just switching things up a little bit. So once you have that, you're just gonna multiply straight across. You have 2 times the square root of 3, which you're gonna write as 2 square root of 3. And in the denominator, whenever you multiply a radical times itself, what that does is it basically just cancels the radicals and you're just left with a number. So that would just be 3. Because if you think about it, the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 9, which is just 3. And that's how you would write your final answer, 2 root 3 over 3. Once again, something that kind of pops up all the time, so I'd rather just take the time and go over how to simplify it now, rather than be confused later. So I'll give you a second for that one. We'll try 1 or 2 more. Okay, let's try another one. Let's do one where there's gonna be a little simplifying. So let's do 4 over the square root of 6. As you notice, it looks exactly the same. I just changed a number or 2. Process is the same, so we just want to make sure we recognize when we see this. Okay, we don't want that in the denominator. We're going to multiply by, we take that square root of 6, and we put that over itself. So when we go straight across, the numerators would be 4 square root of 6. The denominator, remember when you multiply a radical by itself, you're just end up with a number underneath. This one has one extra step. So over here, I couldn't really do anything because this wasn't reducible. This fraction is reducible. So when I say reduce it, basically just ignore the square root part. So just ignore that. But if we looked at this as a fraction, which is the real numbers, we can reduce that because they're both divisible by 2. So you never touch the radical, but you can touch the numbers on the outside. And that would give me 2 square root of 6 over 3. That'll be your final simplified version. So we're just going to do one more of those. I'm just trying to show you little things that will pop up. So next week when you're doing your little assessment on Edge Elastic, let's say your answer came out to this. If you put this, you're still going to get some credit for it. So I'm not going to be like, no, you don't get anything. You did the work. So if you put this, you'll get some credit. If you put this, you'll get some credit. If you put this, you'll get full credit. So just make sure, one, you're showing work on a separate sheet of paper when you're doing an assessment. So I can always go back and give you that partial credit. But once again, if you're not doing it all the way, I'm still going to give you something. Let's do 3 over the square root of 12. What is that? Why did that just ring? Oh, they have it on the Wednesday schedule. These crazy guys up in the office, they never know what's going on. Okay, so same idea. I just changed the numbers. Okay, we can still go through the process. Take that square root of 12, put that over itself. Multiply across, you get 3 square root of 12. The bottom, remember when you multiply by itself, you just get 12. Okay, so that wasn't too terrible. Once again, anything is always better than nothing. So always just try, and I'll give you something. Now this one, I kind of added one more step on. What happened over there is square root of 3 and square root of 6, I can't really do much to. But square root of 12, I can actually simplify. So I'm going to do it off to the side with my factor tree. That's what we went over at the beginning. Because that's divisible by 4. So that would come out to 2 square root of 3. So what I'm going to do is I have the 3 out in front. I'm going to replace square root of 12 with 2 square root of 3. And that's over. Okay. So outside here I can get a 6 square root of 3 over 12. And then I look and then can I reduce this? Yeah, they're both divisible by 6. And I would get 1 square root of 3 over 2 as the answer. So we kind of like progressed our way up. This was the most basic because there wasn't a lot of simplifying going on. And then we can see we can also reduce our fraction sometimes. And then sometimes you might have a radical that you can also break down. I tried to make it so on the assessment there's not too many where you have to do a million steps. So I try to be not terrible about that stuff because I know it's just annoying when you have to do that last one, but it does pop up. We do want to try to be as simplified as possible. So why don't you try this one? This one won't be too terrible, but I just want to make sure you get the general idea before we move on. Let's do 5 over the square root of 10. If I said, can you rationalize that denominator and make sure it's simplified? Can you try that one? If you need help with anything, just let me know. Finished attendance. Give you about another minute. Looks like you're done, so I'm not gonna give you another minute. So, same idea. Multiply by, take the square root of 10, put it over itself. Multiply across 5 square root of 10 over 10. Just always do a quick check. Can I simplify 10? No, because it would just be 2 and 5. That's not helpful. There's no doubles, there's no perfect square. But I do notice that I can kind of reduce this fraction. So those are both divisible by 5. Once again, you never touch the actual radical, just the numbers on the outside. So your final answer would be 1 square root of 10 over 2.
No question.
Yes?
You need to have the 1 there?
No, I was just about to say that as well to you. I was going to say, thank you. If you don't put the 1 there, that's fine. You don't need it. So thank you for bringing that up. So the 1's great, but we kind of assume there's a 1 there. But that's the main idea. So as this stuff pops up, hopefully that just cleared any questions or issues up. Does anyone think they have a question on rationalizing the denominator? Okay, so then we just have 3 more problems, and then we'll just try 1 or 2. So we've been talking about the 6 trig functions. We're not going to do all 6 for every problem, because that's getting a little old. But let's just at least go over we'll just do 1 or 2 for each. What our different situations were. So we should be able to find our trig functions given a point, an equation, or another trig equation, function, whatever you want to call it. So I will give you one of each type, just so once again, the better examples you have, the easier your life is going to be, especially if you label stuff. It's a little bit easier to find stuff in your notes, I think. So we're going to find, let's do sine, we'll just do 2 for each. Let's do sine and secant, so I don't know. If the terminal side, sorry, I'm trying to be formal with my directions. The terminal side of an angle, just because that's how it's going to look on your assessment, goes through the point, and let's do the point. I keep losing my calculator. Try to not make it too terrible for us here. Okay, let's do the point 2, 3. So I'm going to tell you how it's actually going to be set up on the assessment. This is going to be like a 4-part question, and 2 of the parts are going to be really easy. So it's going to say, what is x? You literally have to do no work. X is in the point is 2. Okay, so you would fill in 2. It's going to say, what is y? Once again, not a lot of work. So this one you're halfway done and you really haven't had to do much. Then it's going to say, what is r? Basically for every problem, when we're talking about the trig functions, you need x, y, r. So that's always our main goal. So if I have x and y, it always goes back to our quick little formula. X squared plus y squared equals r squared. Just make sure you have that somewhere. We're going to plug in what we know. So we know x and y. We're going to find r. So I just grab my calci here. 2 squared plus 3 squared is 13. Make sure you take the square root. So r is going to be the square root of 13. Perfectly fine. You are going to get radicals. That's okay. So in Edulastic, you'll have there's a little math thing that pops up. There'll be a little square root symbol. So you just click it, and then you put a 13 under. And then the last thing is we actually need to answer the questions. So this one, what is sine? I think for the ones on the quiz, I only ask you 1, but we're being fancy for this one. And then what is secant? So you would just go back somewhere in your notes, you would try to find your ratios, so your fractions. Sine is y over r. So I'm just going to kind of do my work and then I'll circle my answer. So y over r. In this case, I've already labeled these. So it's 3 over the square root of 13. If you put that, you'll get some credit, but you're not going to get full credit because we need to rationalize the denominator. So I'm going to do that step that we were just talking about. and I'm gonna get 3 square root of 13 over 13. From there, I can't reduce, I can't simplify, so this is what I would put as my answer for sine. Any problems with that one so far? And then secant is, once again, just knowing what the ratio is, and you can have it right in front of you. That's r over x. So I just kind of throw in r is the square root of 13. X is 2. There's nothing else I can do to that, so you would throw that in and then you'd be done. Once again, in Edge Elastic, there's like a little fraction button, so you hit the fraction button to make it a fraction, then you put the square root in. Sometimes, like people, math online is the worst, so I'm with you. So if you input it wrong, but I can kind of figure out what you did, I'll give you the full credit. But just try to simplify as much as you can. But that's the first type of problem you'll see. There's a few of those. Does anyone have a question with that one? Okay. Only 2 more. So let's say this time I'm going to say let's find cosine theta and cotangent theta. Once again, I'm trying to write the directions how I would write them on the actual test. The terminal side of an angle goes through. Oops. And this time I'm going to give you an equation. All right, I'm just trying to figure out some nice numbers so they're not too terrible for us. We'll do that one. Okay, so we'll do 4x minus 5y equals 0. And basically it's going to be set up the same way where I ask what is x, what is y, what is r. So it's basically for every problem. And then we'll ask the 2 trig functions. Yes?
Will we be able to use our notes?
Yes. Yeah, you're at home. You can do whatever you want.
Oh, it's okay.
Huh?
We're doing it online,
Yep, you're gonna do it Monday. So, first thing is, what is x? I have no clue what x is right now. So, we have written some notes. Once again, it was last week, so like if you don't remember it, I feel you. Thank you, someone already got it. But our note said, we're gonna choose an x, and the x we choose is always gonna be the number in front of y. So we're just gonna say it's 5. You know what I mean? Don't worry about the sign. We're just gonna pick 5. And then it's gonna say, what is y? I have no clue what y is. So once I know x, I can plug it into my equation to figure out what y is. So if I take my equation, and I'm gonna put this 5 in for x. I'm just gonna do a little bit of simplifying, that's 20. And I have a little bit of solving. All right, give me a second here. And y is gonna equal 4. Ooh, there we go. If you haven't noticed yet, like if you have a 4 and a 5, it's basically you're gonna have a 4 and a 5. Just always make sure you actually do the step, because sometimes your sign changes and that might affect you in the end. But your coefficients kind of end up being your variables. And then it's gonna ask, what is r? That always goes back to our good old x squared plus y squared equals r squared. So that would be what, 5 squared plus 4 squared?
41.
41, thank you. Something nice. So when we take the square root, I can't simplify that, but I'm just gonna leave it as a square root of 41, okay? So what I'm trying to do, when I originally set it up, it was just like, what's cosine? And I was like, well, if they get that wrong, then they're kind of like, that kind of stinks. So I tried to break it up so you're getting credit for like each little piece that you're doing. So maybe if you got y wrong, I'd still give you credit for doing the other stuff with the wrong y, if that makes sense. So just do your best to fill everything in. And then we just need 2 things. We need cosine and cotangent. So you would go back and say, well, what's cosine? It's x over r. I have everything already listed, so I'm feeling good about plugging that in. that would be 5 over the square root of 41. That will give you some credit, but we need to rationalize for full credit. And that would be your final answer for cosine. And then cotangent is x over y. I still can't remember these sometimes, I've been teaching this forever. So that one's easy, 5 over 4, you're done. So I'll give you a second, I don't like to rush. But that's the general idea of what you're gonna be doing. What's x, y, r? That's basically always our question when we're dealing with the 6 trig functions. And then from there, it will ask you either about 1 or 2 different trig functions and to fill them in. We have one more problem. Does anyone right now have a question with that one or with anything we've seen so far? All right, let's do our last one. Let's leave this up. Might as well. All right, so which ones haven't we done? So I'm gonna say what is, we'll find tangent and cosecant. Those are the two we haven't found yet. And I'm gonna tell you, given, sorry, I'm trying not to give you like horrific numbers. No, I don't want that one. 6, 4. So we'll do that one, so that's. Sorry, this is like for some reason a lot of effort from your end. I'm gonna say given that cosine theta equals 2/3. All right, so you're saying, all right, it's all about labeling. So if you label, you're in good shape. If I give you a trig function, label the trig function. This is cosine. Cosine is x over r. So right now I know those two things. So if it's asking those 3 questions to start, I know x is 2 and I know r is 3. So just by labeling, I have kind of a good chunk of my answer. I do need to find y. So anytime I have something missing, I'm gonna go back to that little Pythagorean theorem. And I'm gonna plug in what I know. Just be careful that you're plugging in the correct spot, because we know x and we know r, and we're trying to find y. I feel like sometimes out of habit you just plug it in for x and y. So just be careful there.
Wait, isn't that only if you find a cog though?
Huh?
It's not only if you find a cog?
No, so you can use it for anything. We've only been using it because we've been given x and y for a lot of the problems. But this one, since we're given x and r, you can just plug in what you know and find what you don't know. Perfect. So then that gives me 4. So you can just use your calculator. That gives me 9. And I do have to do a little rearranging. But yep, you can solve, as long as you have 2 of the variables, it doesn't matter what the third one is, you can always solve for it. So we got y, okay, what's the square root of 5? And then we were given 2 trig functions, tangent. Tangent is y over x. So you would just say, oh, okay, what's y? That's the square root of 5 over x is 2. I don't have to do anything because it's kind of set up, there's no simplifying. And then I also want to find cosecant. So that's r over y. Once again, if you don't have those memorized, it's fine, you can use your notes. So this would be 3 over the square root of 5. We need to do a little bit of simplifying, so that will give you some of the credit, but in general, we're going to try to do our best here to simplify as much as we can. And then your final would be 3 root 5 over 5. So a lot of the things that we talked about at the beginning are popping up, like we might see radicals in the denominator. I don't think we've had any that you have to simplify too much, but you might have to do a little bit of a factor tree type deal. So main answer is just simplify as much as you possibly can. If you do something, you're going to get credit. So please don't ever skip problems. That's just plain old silly. I'll remind you of this tomorrow too, but when you're taking it, once again, it's like 12 or 14 questions. I only give you an hour because I feel like the other day I opened an assignment that I give someone on Angelastic, and they had just had their thing open on one problem for 3.5 hours. Like, what were you even doing? Like, you just opened the problem. That drives me nuts. So you have an hour, so you kind of have to be like, all right, I know from like this time to this time I can actually sit down and concentrate. You have to do it before 4. So basically you have to start it by 3. And the reason being is if there's a technical difficulty, if you can't get on, if you're having some issue, email's great because you can like contact people, but I'm kind of over being contacted 24 hours. So I took my email off my phone. Like I don't check it at night. I just need a break from school.
Same.
So if you went on at 6 and you were like, oh crap, I can't sign on, you're getting a 0 because I'm not helping you and it needs to be done that day. So I'm giving you a time limit. You have to start it by 3. Because by 3 I will check my email.
Wait, so you can't do it, you do it before 3?
Oh yeah, you can do it anytime before 3. I posted at 7, you have till 3. So we are gonna do one more wrap-up problem because we have about 10 more minutes. Main goal today is hopefully, if there were issues last week, I know it's hard with all these weird time breaks. Hopefully that cleared up anything maybe that you had an issue on. I need to look back and I'll do that today. I can't even remember what your assignments were at the beginning of the week. What had to do with, I don't know. So I will look back at those and I'll kind of look at them tomorrow and we can see if you guys had any major questions. Hopefully if there was anything too big, we'll clear it up today. But other than that, we'll kind of just move on. So here's your wrap-up question. Can you find cosine theta if, I need to give me some good numbers here for you. Gotta give you a little simplifying. I'm gonna give you cotangent theta equals, sorry, let me give me some good numbers. Oh, I don't want that one. 7 squared. Oh. Nope. Okay, let's just not do that. Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to get you something that you actually have to simplify, but this is what happens when you just make numbers up off the top of your head. All right, this isn't working, so I'm just gonna magically make something up. And I'm gonna say cotangent is, that's not us. God, what is wrong with us? 3 over 11. I don't know, I just made those up, so I don't know how nice it's gonna be. So you just have to find one thing, cosine theta. On your little test, I'm gonna ask what's x, what's y, what's r, because those are things you should be labeling anyways. So I just throw them in, I might as well give you credit for them. But the main goal for today is can you find cosine theta given that information? So what time do we got at 16? So we'll just have to remember that since it's just gonna kind of start to do mine, to do yours, to check in, all that fun stuff. This is excellent. What does that come up to? 9 plus 121 is 130. $130. Can you send that somewhere? No. So you can't simplify with 130, so it just stays as a square root of 130. What am I finding cosine? Is x over r. So that'll be your final answer. Alright, so as you're working, the answer's up, so just kind of do a little self-check. Make sure you're good. Please make sure if you've been having, I don't know, you've been kind of taking a little time off, that you get back on it, because we may have a few weeks left in the term here. But I would hate for anyone to not have. So I will help you if you need it, if you're having some sort of issue.